Mr. President, President in Office of the Council, honourable members, ladies and gentlemen. In 8 months' time, voters across Europe will judge what we have achieved together in the last 5 years. In these 5 years, Europe has been more present in the lives of citizens than ever before. Europe has been discussed in the coffee houses and popular talk shows all over our continent. Today, I want to look at what we have done together, at what we have yet to do, and I want to present what I believe are the main ideas for a truly European political debate ahead of next year's elections. Honourable members, as we speak, exactly 5 years ago, the United States government took over Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, bailed out AIG, and Lehman Brothers filed for bankruptcy protection. These events triggered the global financial crisis. It evolved into an unprecedented economic crisis, and it became a social crisis with dramatic consequences for many of our citizens. These events have aggravated the debt problem that still distresses our governments. They have led to an alarming increase in employment, especially amongst young people, and they are still holding back our households and our companies. But Europe has fought back. In those 5 years, we have given a determined response. We suffered the crisis together, we realized we had to fight it together, and we did, and we are doing it. If we look back and think about what we have done together throughout the crisis, I think it's fair to say that we would never have thought all of this possible 5 years ago. We are fundamentally reforming the financial sector so that people's savings are safe. We have improved the way governments work together, how they return to sound public finances and modernize their economies. We have mobilized over €700 billion to pull crisis-struck countries back from the brink, the biggest effort ever in stabilization between countries. I still vividly remember my meeting last year with chief economists of many of our leading banks. Most of them were expecting Greece to leave the euro. All of them feared the disintegration of the euro area. Now, we can give a clear reply to those fears. No one has left or has been forced to leave the euro. This year, the European Union enlarged from 27 to 28 member states, and next year, the euro area will grow from 17 to 18 member states. What matters now is what we make of this progress. Do we talk it up or talk it down? Do we draw confidence from it to pursue what we have started, or do we belittle the results of our efforts? Honourable members, I just came back from the G20 in St. Petersburg. I can tell you, this year, contrary to recent years, we Europeans did not receive any lessons from other parts of the world on how to address the crisis. We received appreciation and encouragement. Not because the crisis is over, because it is not over. But the resilience of our Union has been tested and will continue to be tested. But what we are doing creates the confidence that we are overcoming the crisis, provided we are not complacent. We are tackling our challenges together, and we have to tackle them together. Because in our world of geo-economic and geopolitical tectonic changes, I believe that only together, as the European Union, we can give our citizens what they aspire, that our values, our interests, our prosperity are protected and promoted in the age of globalization. So now is the time to rise above purely national issues and parochial interests, and to have real progress for Europe, to bring a truly European perspective to debate with national constituencies. Now is the time for all those who care about Europe, whatever their political or ideological position, wherever they come from, to speak up for Europe. If we ourselves don't do it, we cannot expect others to do it either. Honourable members, we have come a long way since the start of the crisis. In last year's State of the Union speech, I stated that despite all our efforts, our responses have not yet convinced citizens, markets or our international partners. 1 year on, The facts tell us that our efforts have started to convince. Overall spreads are coming down. The most vulnerable countries are paying less to borrow. Industrial output is increasing. Market trust is returning. Stock markets are performing well. The business outlook is steadily improving. Consumer confidence is sharply rising. We see that the countries who are most vulnerable to the crisis and are now doing most to reform their economies are starting to note positive results. In Spain, as a signal of the very important reforms and increased competitiveness, exports of goods and services now make up 33% of GDP, more than ever since the introduction of the euro. Ireland has been able to draw money from capital markets since the summer of 2012. The economy is expected to grow for a third consecutive year in 2013, and Irish manufacturing companies are rehiring staff. In Portugal, the external current account, which was structurally negative, is now expected to be broadly balanced, and growth is picking up after many quarters in the red. Greece has completed, just in 3 years, a truly remarkable fiscal adjustment, is regaining competitiveness, and is nearing, for the first time in decades, a primary surplus. And Cyprus, that started the program later, is also implementing that program as scheduled, which is a precondition for return to growth. So my point is this. For Europe, recovery is within sight. Let's be realistic in analysis. Let's not overestimate the positive results, but let's not also underestimate what has been done. Of course, we need to be vigilant. One swallow does not make a summer, nor one fine day. Even one fine quarter does not mean we are out of the economic heavy weather. But it does prove we are on the right track. On the basis of the figures and evolutions as we now see them, we have good reason to be confident. This should push us to keep up our efforts. We owe it to those for whom the recovery is not yet within reach, to those who do not yet profit from positive developments. We owe it to our 26 million unemployed, especially to the young people unemployed that are looking to us, and they want to have reasons to feel hope about Europe and about their own countries. So hope and confidence is also part of the economic equation. Honourable members, if we are where we are today, it is because we have shown the resolve to adapt both our politics and our policies to the lessons drawn from the crisis. And when I say we, I really mean we. It has really been a joint effort. At each and every step, you, the European Parliament, you have played a decisive role through one of the most impressive records of legislative work ever. I personally believe this is not sufficiently known by the citizens of Europe, and you deserve more credit and recognition for this. So let us continue to work together to reform our economies, for growth and jobs, and to adapt our institutional architecture. Only if we do so, we will leave this phase of the crisis behind us as well. There is a lot we can still deliver together in this Parliament's and this Commission's mandate. What we can and must do, first and foremost, let's be concrete, is delivering the banking union. It is the first and most urgent phase on the way to deepen our economic and monetary union as mapped out in the Commission's blueprint presented last autumn. The legislative process on the single supervisory mechanism is almost completed. The next step is the ECB's independent valuation of bank assets before it takes up its supervisory role. Our attention now must urgently turn to the single resolution mechanism. The Commission's proposal is on the table since July, and together we must do the necessary to have it adopted still during this term. It is the way to ensure that taxpayers are no longer the ones in the front line for paying the price of bank failure. It is the way to make progress in decoupling bank from sovereign risk. It is the way to remedy one of the most alarming and unacceptable results of the crisis: increased fragmentation of Europe's financial sector and credit markets, even an implicit renationalisation. And it is also the way to help restoring normal lending to the economy, notably to SMEs. Because in spite of the accommodating monetary policy, credit is not yet sufficiently flowing to the economy across the euro area. This needs to be addressed resolutely. Ultimately, this is about one thing: growth, which is necessary to remedy today's most pressing problem: unemployment. The current level of unemployment is economically unsustainable, politically untenable, socially unacceptable. So all of us here in the Commission, and I'm happy to have all my colleagues of the Commission today with me, all of us, not only one or two commissioners, but this is a collective effort, all of us want to work with you intensively to deliver as much of our growth agenda, our sustainable growth agenda, as we possibly can. We are mobilizing all the instruments we have at European level. But of course, we have to be honest, not all instruments are at European level. Some of them are at national level. And I want to focus on the implementation of the decisions that are most crucial now: youth employment and financing the real economy for SMEs. We need also to avoid a jobless recovery. Europe, therefore, must speed up the pace of structural reforms. Our country-specific recommendations set out what the Member States must do in this respect. And at European level, because there is what can be done at national and what can be done at European level, the focus should be also on what matters most for the real economy. Exploiting the full potential of the single market comes first. We have a well-functioning single market for goods, and we see the economic benefits of that. We need to extend the same formula to other areas: mobility, communications, energy, finance and e-commerce, to name but a few. We have to remove the obstacles that hold back dynamic companies and people. We have to complete connecting Europe. I'd like to announce that today we will formally adopt a proposal that gives a push towards a single market for telecoms. Citizens know that Europe has dramatically brought down their costs for roaming. Our proposal will strengthen guarantees and lower prices for consumers and present new opportunities for companies. We know that in the future, trade will be more and more digital. Isn't it a paradox that we have an internal market for goods, but when it comes to the digital market, we have 28 national markets? How can we grab all the opportunities of the future that are opened by the digital economy if we don't conclude this internal market? The same logic applies to the broader digital agenda. It solves real problems and improves daily life for citizens. The strength of Europe's future industrial base depends on how well people and business are interconnected. And by properly combining the digital agenda with data protection and defense of privacy, our European model strengthens the trust of the citizens, both with respect to internal and external developments. Adopting the proposed legislation on data protection is of utmost importance to the European Commission. The single market is a key lever for competitiveness and employment. Adopting all remaining proposals under the Single Market Act I and II and implementing the Connecting Europe facility in the next few months will lay the foundations for prosperity in the years to come. We are also adapting to a dynamic transformation on a global scale. So we must encourage this innovative dynamism at a European scale. That is why we must also invest more in innovation, in technology and the role of science. I have a great faith in science, in the capacity of the human mind, and capacity of a creative society to solve its problems. The world is changing dramatically, and I believe many of the solutions are going to come, in Europe and outside Europe, from new science discoveries, from new technologies, and I would like Europe to be leading that effort globally. This is why we, Parliament and Commission, we have made such a priority of Horizon 2020 in the discussions on the European Union budget. That is why we use the European Union budget to invest in skills, education and vocational training, dynamising and supporting talent. That is why we have pushed for Erasmus+. And that is why, later this autumn, we will make further proposals for an industrial policy fit for the 21st century, while we mobilize support for SMEs, because we believe a strong, dynamic industrial base is indispensable for a strong European economy. And whilst fighting climate change, our 2020 goals have set our economy on the path to green growth and resource efficiency, reducing costs and creating jobs. By the end of this year, we will come out with concrete proposals for our energy and climate framework up to 2030. And we will continue to shape the international agenda by fleshing out a comprehensive, legally binding global climate agreement by 2015 with our partners. Frankly, we need the others also on board. Europe alone cannot do all the fight against climate change. We need a level playing field globally, and we should lead that effort. At the same time, we will pursue our work on the impact of energy prices on competitiveness and also on social cohesion. All these drivers for growth are part of our Europe 2020 agenda, and fully and swiftly implementing it is more urgent than ever. In some cases, we have even to go beyond the Europe 2020 agenda. This means we must also pursue our active and assertive trade agenda. It is about linking us closer to growing third markets and guaranteeing our place in the global supply chain. Contrary to perception, when most of our citizens think that we are losing in global trade, in fact we have been increasing our surplus to the rest of the world. We have a significant and increased trade surplus of more than 300 billion euro a year in goods, in service and agriculture. We need to build on that. This too will demand our full attention in the months to come, notably with the transatlantic trade and investment partnership with the US and the negotiations with Canada and Japan. And last but not least, we need to step up our game in implementing the multi-annual financial framework, the European budget. The EU budget is the most concrete lever we have at hand to boost investments in some of our regions. The European investment is the only way they have to get some public investment, because they cannot now have the resources at national level. Both the European Parliament and the Commission wanted more resources. We have been in that fight together. But even so, let's be honest, one single year's EU budget represents more money at today's prices than the whole Marshall Plan in its time. Let us now make sure that the programmes can start on the 1st of January 2014, that the results are being felt on the ground in our regions across Europe, and that we use the possibilities of innovative financing, from instruments that have already started, to European Investment Bank money, to project bonds. We have to make good on the commitment we have made in July. From the Commission side, we will deliver. We will, for example, present the second amending budget for 2014 still this month. There is no time to waste, so I warn against holding it up. In particular, I urge Member States not to delay. I cannot emphasize this enough. Citizens will not be convinced with rhetoric and promises only, but with a concrete set of common achievements. We have to show the many areas where Europe has solved problems for citizens. Europe is not the cause of problems. Europe is part of the solution. I address what we have to do still more extensively in today's letters to the President of the European Parliament, which you will also receive, so I will not go now in detail regarding our programme for next year. But my point today is clear. Together, there is still a lot to achieve before the elections. It's not the time to throw down the towel, it's the time to put our sleeves up and work a lot. Honourable members, of course none of this is easy. I think that everybody recognises that we have been living extremely challenging times, a real stress test to the European Union. We know also that the path of permanent and profound reform is as demanding as it is unavoidable. Let's make no mistake, there is no way back to business as usual. Some people believe that after this everything will come back as it was before. They are wrong. This crisis is different. This is not a cyclical crisis, but a structural crisis. We will not come back to the old normal. We have to shape a new normal. We are in a transforming period of history. And we have to understand that. And not just say it, but to draw all the consequences for this, including in our state of mind and how we react to the problems. We see from the first results that it is possible to win that battle. And we all know that it's not only possible, that it is necessary. At this point in time, with a fragile recovery, the biggest downside risk I see is, you know what? Is political. This is the biggest downside risk we have. Lack of stability or lack of determination and perseverance. Over the last years, we have seen that anything that casts doubt on government's commitment to reform is instantly punished. On the positive side, strong and convincing decisions have an important and immediate impact. In this phase of the crisis, government's job is to provide the certainty and predictability that markets still lack. I'm sure you all know Justus Lipsius. Justus Lipsius is the name of the council building in Brussels. Justus Lipsius was a very influential 16th century humanist scholar that wrote a very important book called De Constantia. He wrote, "Constancy is a right and immovable strength of the mind, neither lift up nor pressed down with external or casual accidents. Only a strength of the mind," he argued, "based on judgment and sound reason can help you through confusing and alarming times." I hope that in these times, difficult times, all of us, including the government representatives that meet at the Justus Lipsius building, show that determination, that perseverance, and when it comes to the implementation of the decisions taken. Because one of the issues that we have is to be coherent, not just take decisions, but afterwards be able to implement them on the ground. Honourable members, it is only natural that over the last few years our efforts to overcome the economic crisis have overshadowed everything else. But our idea of Europe needs to go far beyond economy. We are much more than a market. The European ideal touches the very foundations of European society. It is about values, and I underline this word, values. It is based on a firm belief in political, social and economic standards, grounded in our social market economy. In today's world, the European Union level is indispensable to protect these values and standards and promote citizens' rights, from consumer protection to labour rights, from women's rights to respect for minorities, from environmental standards to data protection and privacy. Whether defending our interests in the international trade, securing our energy provision, or restoring people's sense of fairness by fighting tax fraud and tax evasion, only by acting as a union do we pull our weight at the world stage. Whether seeking impact for the development and humanitarian aid we give to developing countries, managing our common external borders, or promoting in Europe a strong security and defence policy, only by integrating more can we really reach our objectives. There is no doubt about it. Our internal coherence and international relevance are inextricably linked. Our economic attraction and political traction are fundamentally entwined. Does anyone seriously believe that if the euro had collapsed, we or our member states would still have any credibility left internationally? Does everyone still realize how enlargement has been a success in terms of healing history's deep scars, in establishing democracies, where some years ago no one had thought it possible? How neighbourhood policy was and still is the best way to provide security and prosperity in regions of vital importance for Europe? Where would we be without all of this? Today, countries like Ukraine are more than ever seeking closer ties to the European Union, attracted by our economic and social model. We cannot turn our back on them. We cannot accept any attempt to limit these countries' own sovereign choices. Free will and free consent need to be respected. These are also the principles that lie at the basis of our Eastern Partnership, which we want to take forward at our summit in Vilnius. And does everyone still remember just how much Europe has suffered from its wars during the last century and how European integration was the valid answer? Next year, it will be 1 century after the start of the First World War, a war that tore Europe apart, from Sarajevo to the Somme. We must never take peace for granted. We need to recall that it is because of Europe that former enemies now sit around the same table and work together. It is only because they were offered a European perspective that now even Serbia and Kosovo came to an agreement under the mediation of the European Union. Last year's Nobel Peace Prize reminded us of that historic achievement, that Europe is a project of peace. We should be more aware of it ourselves. Sometimes I think we should not be ashamed to be proud. One thing is arrogance. We don't want to be arrogant. But we should be proud of Europe, what we have achieved. We should look towards the future, but with the wisdom we gained from the past. Let me say this to all those who rejoice in Europe's difficulties and who want to roll back our integration and go back to isolation. The pre-integrated Europe of the divisions, the war, the trenches, is not what people desire and deserve. The European continent has never in its history known such a long period of peace as since the creation of the European communities. It is our duty to preserve it and to deepen it. Honourable members, it is precisely with these values that we address the unbearable situation in Syria, which has tested over the last months the world's conscience so severely. The European Union has led the international aid response by mobilising close to 1.5 billion euros, of which 850 million euros comes directly from the European Union budget. The Commission will do its utmost to help the Syrian people and refugees in neighbouring countries. We have recently witnessed events we thought had long been eradicated. The use of chemical weapons is a horrendous act that deserves a clear condemnation and a strong answer. The international community, with the United Nations at its centre, carries a collective responsibility to sanction these acts and to put an end to this conflict. The proposal to put serious chemical weapons beyond use is potentially a positive development. The Syrian regime must now demonstrate that it will implement this without any delay. In Europe, we believe that ultimately only a political solution stands a chance of delivering the lasting peace that the Syrian people deserve. Honourable members, there are those who claim that a weaker Europe will make their country stronger, that Europe is a burden. They will be better off without it. My reply is clear. We all need a Europe that is united, strong and open. In the debate that is ongoing all across Europe, the bottom line question is, do you want to improve Europe or give it up? My answer is clear. Let's engage. If you don't like Europe as it is, improve it. Find ways to make it stronger, internally and internationally, and you will have in me the firmest of supporters. Find ways that allow for diversity without creating discriminations, and I will be with you all the way. But don't turn away from it. I recognize, as any human endeavour, the European Union is not perfect. For example, controversies about the division of labour between the national and European levels will never be conclusively ended. I value subsidiarity highly. For me, subsidiarity is not a technical concept. It's a fundamental democratic principle. An ever closer union among the citizens of Europe demands that decisions are taken as open and transparently as possible, and as closely to the people as possible. Not everything needs a solution at European level. Europe must focus on where it can add most value. Where this is not the case, it should not meddle. The European Union needs to be big on big things and smaller on smaller things. something we may occasionally have neglected in the past. The European Union needs to show it has the capacity to set both positive and negative priorities. As all governments, we need to take extra care of the quality and quantity of our regulation, knowing that, as Montesquieu said, les lois inutiles affaiblissent les lois nécessaires. Useless laws weaken the necessary ones. But there are, honourable members, areas of major importance where Europe must have more integration, more unity, where only a strong Europe can deliver results. I believe a political union needs to be our political horizon, as I stressed in last year's State of the Union. This is not just demand of a passionate European. This is an indispensable way forward to consolidate our progress and ensure the future. Ultimately, the solidity of our policies, namely of the Economic and Monetary Union, depend on the credibility of the political and institutional construct that supports it. So we have mapped out, in the Commission blueprint for a deep and genuine Economic and Monetary Union, not only the economic and monetary features, but also the necessities, possibilities and limits of deepening our institutional setup in the medium and long term. The Commission will continue to work for the implementation of its blueprint, step by step, one phase after the other. And I confirm, as announced last year, the intention to present, before the European elections, further ideas on the future of our Union and how best to consolidate and deepen the community method and the community approach in the longer term. That way, these ideas can be subject to a real European debate. They will set out the principles and orientations that are necessary for a true political union. Honourable members, we can only meet the challenge of our time if we strengthen the consensus on fundamental objectives. Politically, we must not be divided by difference between the euro area and those outside it, between the centre and periphery, between north and south, between east and west. The European Union must remain a project for all members, a community of equals. Economically, Europe has always been a way to close gaps between countries, regions and people, and that must remain so. We cannot do member states' work for them. The responsibility remains theirs, but we can and must complement it with European responsibility and European solidarity. For that reason, strengthening the social dimension is a priority for the months to come, together with our social partners. The Commission will come with its communication on the social dimension of the Economic and Monetary Union on the 2nd of October. Solidarity is a key element of what being part of Europe is all about, and something to take pride on. Safeguarding its values, such as the rule of law, is what the European Union was made to do, from its inception to the latest chapters in enlargement. In last year's State of the Union speech, at a moment of challenges to the rule of law in our own member states, I addressed the need to make a bridge between political persuasion and targeted infringement procedures on one hand, and what I call nuclear option of Article 7 of the Treaty, namely suspension of a member state's rights. Experience has confirmed the usefulness of the Commission role as an independent and objective referee. We should consolidate this experience through a more general framework. It should be based on the principle of equality between member states, activated only in situations where there is a serious systemic risk to the rule of law, and triggered by predefined benchmarks. The Commission will come forward with a communication on this. I believe it is a debate key to our idea of Europe. This does not mean that national sovereignty or democracy are constrained, but we do need a robust European mechanism to influence the equation when basic common principles are at stake. There are certain non-negotiable values that the European Union and its member states must and shall always defend. Honourable members, the polarisation that resulted from the crisis poses a risk to us all, to the project, to the European project. We, legitimate representatives of the European Union, can turn the tide. You, direct democratic representatives of Europe, directly elected, you will be at the forefront of the political debate. The question I want to pose to you is the following. Which picture of Europe will voters be presented with? The candid version or the cartoon version? The myths or the facts? The honest, reasonable version or the extremist, populist version? It's an important choice to make. I know some people out there will say Europe is to blame for the crisis and hardship. But we can remind people that the European Union was not at the origin of the crisis. It resulted from mismanagement of public finances from the national governments and irresponsible behavior in the financial market. We can explain how Europe has worked to fix the crisis, what we would have lost if we had not succeeded in upholding the single market, because the single market was under threat, and upholding the common currency, because some time ago some people were predicting the end of the common currency. If we had not coordinated recovery efforts and employment initiatives, how would we be now? Some people will say that it is Europe that is forcing governments to cut spending. But we can remind voters that government debt got way out of hand even before the crisis. Not because, but despite Europe. We can add that the most vulnerable in our societies and our children will end up paying the price if we don't persevere now. And the truth is that countries inside the euro or outside the euro, in Europe or outside Europe, they are making efforts to curb their very burdened public finances. Some will campaign saying that we have given too much money to vulnerable countries. Others will say that we have given too little money to the most vulnerable countries. But every one of us can explain what we did and why. There is a direct link between one country's loans and another country's banks, between one country's investments and another country's business, between one country's workers and another country's companies. This kind of interdependence means only European solutions can work. And what I tell people is, when you are in the same boat, one cannot say, your end of the boat is sinking. We were in the same boat when things went well, and we are in it together when things are difficult. Some people might campaign saying, Europe has grabbed too much power. Others will claim Europe always does too little, too late. The interesting thing is that sometimes we have the same, saying that Europe is not doing enough, and at the same time not giving more instruments for Europe to do what Europe has to do. But we can explain that member states have entrusted Europe with tasks and competences. The European Union is not a foreign power. The European Union is the result of democratic decisions of the institutions and the member states. At the same time, we must acknowledge that in some areas Europe still lacks the power to do what is asked of it, a fact that is all too easily forgotten by those, and we know there are many out there, that are always ready to nationalize success and to Europeanize failure. Ultimately, what we have and what we don't have is the result of democratic decision-making, and I think we should remind people of that. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, honourable members, I hope the European Parliament will take up this challenge with all the idealism it holds, with as much realism and determination as the times demands of us. The arguments are there. The facts are there. The agenda has been set out. In 8 months' time, voters will decide. Now it's up to us to make the case for Europe. We can do so by using the next 8 months to conclude as much as we can. We have a lot to do still. Namely, adopt and implement the European budget, the MFF. This is critical for investment in our regions all over Europe. This is indispensable for the first priority we have, the fight against unemployment, notably youth unemployment. Another priority, advance and implement the banking union. This is critical to address the problem of financing for businesses and SMEs. These are our clear priorities, employment and growth. Our job is not finished, it is in its decisive phase. Because, honourable members, the elections will not only be about the European Parliament, nor will they be about the European Commission or about the Council, about this or that personality. The elections will be about Europe. We will be judged together. So let us work together for Europe, with passion and with determination. Let's not forget that 100 years ago, Europe was sleepwalking into the catastrophe of the war of 1914. Next year, in 2014, I hope Europe will be walking out of a crisis more united, stronger and open. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much indeed, President of the Commission. President, you mentioned Justus Lipsius and the name of the Council building. That was a good point. But I wonder what might be the reasons for the Council building being named in that way. Now, Joseph Daul has the floor.
President of the European Parliament, of the European Commission and of the European Council, dear fellow members, this debate on the State of the Union as we approach the end of our term of parliamentary office I think is particularly timely. I'd like to thank you, President, for the work which you have done in the Commission and all of your team. We've been through a crisis and some have thought that demagoguery would be the right way out. The way out would be to be populist in approach, and you haven't taken that approach. You've looked at the way in which member states have been making their budgets and you've put forward proposals for reform, and you've done that in a clear-sighted way. All member states must be treated in the same way. We can't have double standards. That's a duty to our citizens. And this is particularly important when we look at the stage when measures begin to bear fruit. Latvia has come out of the crisis. Ireland is on the right track. Unemployment is going down for the first time in months in Portugal. There's significant investment underway in Spain. Tourism has recovered this summer in Greece. In this quarter, the euro area is also on the way back to growth. Now, this doesn't mean that we should sit on our laurels or that we should cease to be unstinting in our efforts. We have to pursue reform. We have to move forward, and I think the Commission can play a particular role there. It's into the second half now of the match, and the whistle's blown, and now we need to complete the single market. That can add at least 1% to growth. It's a conservative estimate. We have an agreement on a broader recognition of professional qualifications. This is a victory for the people of Europe. We are also doing work on the financial sector, working on a banking union. There are budgetary reforms in the MFF too. And hearing your words, dear President, I think this is a message that we should give to Council too. We have reached agreement on this. The hold-up is now in Council, and I think there's a lot of work for you to do there, and you will have to persuade a lot of people, but I place my trust in you. We need to ensure that Council will meet its obligations in order to ensure that we can execute the new budget. Dear fellow members, we need a European impetus for growth. Legislation and targeted investment can target job creation. We need to ensure that our public finances are in order. Some heads of state and government have taken brave, necessary decisions for the good of their countries and for the good of the EU. But it's not enough to have a wise budget. You need to take the right decisions. Economics is not a precise science, and not all measures are effective. We need to recognize that. One example, we talk about services. We think so much about services that we've forgotten about industry. Where are services now? Not in Europe, for the most part. So we need to invest in industry again to create jobs. We shouldn't be afraid of saying that. That is also the role of Europe. Dear fellow members, the economic crisis has not only affected our financial institutions, it has also eaten away at citizens' trust in their governments. And the financial crisis is not due to Europe. It's easy to say that. It's actually Europe and the euro that has saved European citizens' savings books. We need to move away from traditional political discourse because it's no longer washing with the citizens, and there's an easy path to nationalism and populism. We should not go down that path. We don't want our continent to return to an era of decline. The European elections will lead to a debate very soon. It won't be a left-right division exclusively. It will be about visions for Europe. What kind of Europe do we want? And Europe is the best place to defend the interests of Europeans. We need European diplomacy. We need European common defence, not to go to war against anyone, but to ensure that we have peace and to help the poorest people in the world. The less Europe you have, the more failure you have. And what we need to do is take stock of where we are and say now that Europe is on the right track. We need to take steps forward, hold our heads high and say we are partners, we will work together with the Commission to build a common future for Europe. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Daul. Now for the Socialists and Democrats, Mr. Swoboda has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. President Barroso, as in all the speeches before, you describe a glass which is half full as totally full. I will demonstrate the glass is still half empty. You spoke about figures. Yes, there are some good figures. We are happy about that. But I want to speak about people, about women, about the younger generation, about children who suffer still with this austerity policy. You spoke about increasing investment confidence. But why, Mr. Barroso, is there a lack of confidence of citizens in Europe? This has to be answered also by the Commission, the Commission President. Recently also Prime Minister Samaras, the future presidency of the Council, spoke about the recovery. With 60% still unemployed of the young people, with trying to find a new package for Greece. Some people speak about a recovery. Spain, you read probably recently the article about the young generation, the children who have to go to school to be fed because they cannot get meals enough at home. And do you know, Mr. Barroso, how many jobs have been created in Spain in the last months? 31. 31 new jobs. This is the recovery in Spain. That's a scandal. In Portugal, your own country, I don't know if, Mr. Barroso, you spoke like I did recently when I was in Setúbal with the Caritas. They can show you that children are taken out of the kindergarten because people are ashamed to send their children with poor clothes into the kindergarten. This is also the reality of Europe. Show that the glass is not only half full, it's also half empty. Still, we have still a lot to do and to change the policies also of the Commission. Because austerity is increasing the rift between the rich and poor, between the North and the South. It is enhancing racism and xenophobia, blaming the others, the foreigners, the migrant workers, the welfare tourists from Bulgaria and Romania is very popular, for example, in Great Britain by the Conservatives and even more by UKIP and others. This is also Europe today. Austerity is undermining solidarity between states, but also between citizens. Yes, I agree we need a strong Europe, a much stronger Europe. How can we support Cathy Ashton's important work if we don't have a stronger Europe? And that means, of course, also more investment. Because investment, public and private investment, is lacking. I saw many young entrepreneurs who would like to go for new start-ups if they would get credits and investment. I've been recently at Porsche and BASF, one of the leading companies in Germany, and I saw the high quality of work. But you know, Mr. Barroso, even in rich Germany, there's a lack of investment in infrastructure. They have to close bridges in highways because they cannot be prepared. And some people say internet speed is sometimes slower in rich Germany than in some of our poorer countries. So we have to fight together in all our countries for more investment. Mr. Barroso, you mentioned also the civil liberties situation. Yes, you're right, but I would be even stronger. How can it be that a black minister in Italy is attacked again daily by even some of the members here in this parliament? It's a shame. We should be proud to have a black minister in one of our European governments. Journalists and even friends of journalists are intimidated in some of the countries. Laws against media freedom are passed in some of our countries, and Roma are attacked again even stronger than before, and that we have to fight against very strongly. Therefore, I demand from the Commission more policies for economic recovery, more policies for social cohesion and solidarity, and more strength for defending Europe of the rule of the law. And therefore, you mentioned some of the proposals will come forward. For example, the social dimension of the EMU. But I ask you, things have been ready already in spring. Why does it need nearly half a year to come forward with that? Are you afraid that some governments are against it? I didn't hear, perhaps you mentioned, we passed a legislative proposal on the restructuring of industry because we want to restructure industry. We are not conservatives who say once an industry has to stay an industry as it is, but it must be under social conditions. Why don't you have the courage to come forward with a legislative proposal on the restructuring of industries? Because some of the countries are against it. You are President of the Commission. The Commission must have the strength also to fight not only with this Parliament, but also with the Council. And I hope at least that you come forward with some proposals on these issues, or some in your Commission preventing this. We need that. And also on health and safety regulation, because I spoke about the health situation, you just have to have a quick look into the book, Why Austerity Kills in the true sense. Why in austerity the rate of suicide is increasing and many other things. Therefore, we need also health and safety regulations also from the Commission. But let me address also the Council. We had an agreement on the MFF. Why is the Council breaking the agreement on the MFF? We had an agreement, in this case together with the Commission, fighting for front-loading the fight against youth unemployment. The Council doesn't front-load, the Council reduces the money for youth unemployment. This is not acceptable for us. How can you present a budget for 2014 which is not up to the standard, which is not up to the agreement? How can the Council violate the law and the treaty in not negotiating with the Parliament about things which have to be negotiated? We have to stick to the law and to the rules, and I demand from the Council to come forward with a reasonable budget in the framework of the MFF also for 2014. We will not, my group will not decide on a budget which is not up to the standard to fight against youth unemployment in Europe, because this is the biggest task. Talk alone is not enough. We want action also from the Council. And we expect on the FTT, because there is now a lot of torpedoing against the FTT, we expect from the Council, and of course with the help of the Commission, that finally the promise to our citizens that also the financial sector has to contribute by the FTT will be kept. It's not acceptable that so many citizens suffer and the banks and the financial institutions do not their contribution to make the crisis solved. This is not acceptable. At the end, we will have an election campaign. The President referred to it. The centre-left has very different approaches than the centre-right on many issues, especially on social issues. But I hope that the centre of this Parliament is defending the future of Europe. If there are some governments now who say that the sentence ever-closing union has to be deleted. We say no. We want an ever-closing union in economic fields, in foreign affairs. This is the only way we can go. And therefore I believe in the vision of the United States of Europe. And as the United States of America is not a unitary state, Europe never will be. It will have its diversity. But get rid of this nationalism and xenophobia. With all our differences between right and left, let's fight for a common Europe. A Europe is strong enough to defend itself. A Europe is strong enough to say whatever we have to say and to do, from Syria to Egypt and in the competition with China and all the others. We cannot defend the interests of our citizens if we go back to nationalism and xenophobia. We have to go forward to a common, united Europe. Thank you very much.
Herr Swoboda, es wird eine Frage.
Mr. Swoboda, Mr. Mayor Oreja has a question for you.
Sí, señor.
Yes. Mr. Swoboda, you referred to Spain. Now, I don't know whether there was a misunderstanding due to the translation, but you talked about a scandal. Over the last month, we've had 31 new jobs added to lots of other new jobs. So what do you mean by scandal? Is job creation a scandal? Or when under socialist government millions of jobs were destroyed in Spain? So what do you mean by scandal, Mr. Swoboda?
Wer war das? Bitte, Herr Swoboda.
Mr. Swoboda.
Recovery. You think about thousands of new jobs, not of 28 or 31. This is the scandal, that in this precarious situation, one is proud about what your government has been done. It's not only about politics. And then it's just 31 jobs. And do you know what happened as well? And you know perfectly well. If you push people out of the queue of the unemployed, because people don't find a job, people despair, people don't have the hope to have a job, then you can have a good record. But for me, recovery is if more people come to the jobs and not less people to the unemployment row because they are despairing. Many people in Spain, but not only in Spain, in many other countries, leave the country. You know perfectly well how many people left the country to Argentina, to Latin America, other countries in Latin America, to Germany. We cannot solve the issue of unemployment and telling young people, leave the country, find your job elsewhere. This is not our policy in any way.
Das Wort hat jetzt für die Fraktion.
And now, on behalf of the Liberal Group, Mr. Verhofstadt.
Dear colleagues, Mr. Barroso, this was, I think, your last State of the Union before the elections, and you have also spoken about these elections. But let me be very frank. I think there is absolutely today no room for complacency, because in my opinion a number of important things, maybe the most important things, are still to be done to tackle this crisis. And it's not that I'm saying that myself. There was last week's edition of The Economist. They wrote, and I quote, our sleepwalking leaders must start now to agree if we want to avoid disaster. The Economist was not talking about the Commission and the President of the Commission. I think that the sleepwalking leaders that they meant were more to find in the Council than in the Commission. But I think it's a fair analysis of what is happening. I think that we have to be clear here, dear colleagues. This crisis is not over. And it's true, you have given a whole bunch, a whole range of early signs of recovery, but I think we have to make a realistic assessment, a realistic analysis of the situation. These first signs of recovery are more the proof of the fact that we hit the bottom of the recession. the bottom of the recession, and that means that we enter in what I call a second phase of this crisis. I think it's far too easy only to see the negative points, as has been done a few minutes ago. I think it's also not fair only to see the positive signs and say, okay, it's over now, we are going up again. That it's not true. What we in fact see is a second phase in this crisis. A long period of economic stagnation we shall enter. What I call a Japanese winter. You know, in Japan they had also in the 90s a real estate bubble. They entered a non-solved banking problem, and for 2 decades they got low growth figures, high unemployment figures, growth between 0 and 2%, and that is what we are falling in now at this moment. So my problem with the State of the Union, Mr. Barroso, is that it fails to show a consistent vision to that problem. How to avoid a Japanese winter, how to avoid 2 lost decades of economic stagnation in the next 20 years. What we do to avoid that? What is our common vision so that we fall not in that trap? And personally, I think that 3 things are necessary. 3 big reforms, 3 big reforms towards a new Europe. The first is, and you have spoken about that, and I come back to this, a real banking union that is more than the single supervisory mechanism that we have today. The second is, and that was not enough, I think, in your vision on the future, we need a more integrated Eurozone with a real government in the Eurozone and in the European Union, with a common treasury, with common financial instruments so that we can finance our investment at a lower interest rate. We are, in an average, paying 2% more interest in Europe than, for example, in Japan and in America to finance our investment. So how can we recover? And 3, I think also that we have to open the issue, is it not necessary to have a broader task also for our central bank, like the Bank of Japan is doing, like the Federal Reserve Board in the United States are doing, that is that next to inflation targeting you should have also GDP targeting, gross domestic product targeting. And in fact, Mr. President, what I want to do today in this debate on the State of the Union is to do a proposal to our Parliament now to do something in these last 8 months. Let's be honest, we can do this last 8 months as we do it now, with the big fights between the different political parties and the Council, and then we arrive with nothing at all because we shall enter in the election debate and the election campaign. Or we can use this time, this 7–8 months, to pick up a number of files where we are saying that is an added value for our people and for our citizens. Let's do a number of crucial files and dossiers in the next months so that we can also do something concrete in this 7–8 months of this period of this legislature. My proposal are 2 things. We have a proposal now, dear colleagues, from the Commission on the Resolution Fund to complete the banking union. Why not, on a fast track, adopt this proposal of the Commission? I think that everybody here, all the groups, can agree on the proposal that Mr. Barnier has put on the table on the banking union and the Resolution Fund. Let's do a fast track and let's immediately start negotiation with the Council on this. If we first of all start with a report and making our own mandate, then we shall lose months and months and we shall not enter in the discussion with the Council. And my second proposal is in the same sense, in the same direction. You have now a package on the digital agenda to complete the single market with open internet, with lower roaming tariffs. Or we are discussing this and we are losing months in the Parliament, or together we are saying, yes, okay, this is a good proposal of Mrs. Kroes and of the Commission. Let's go forward and let's use a fast track. Let's immediately start the negotiation. Why losing months and months to define a mandate on this, and then losing that time and having nothing at all when the elections are there? No lower roaming tariffs and no open internet. So my proposal to all the groups is that in the next weeks, in the next months, we make a deal on that. And the same is happening for the MFF. Sorry, and I'm saying that to the Council, and I'm repeating to what Mr. Swoboda has said, there shall be no agreement with the Parliament if for the first time what you're giving on the MFF is in fact breaching your word. That is what you're doing. You're putting on the table a budget 2014 that has lower figures than the MFF that we have to approve. How can that be possible? And finally, Mr. President, I am concluding with that. I think that the next election shall not be a big fight between the left and the right. I like that. Certainly when you're in the center, you have all the problems on your head. I think it's more between Euroscepticism, who think that you can put the world outside your borders, and the pro-European forces. And I hope that all the pro-European forces can be united to beat Eurosceptics. Thank you.
Das Wort hat
And now I give the floor for the Green Group to Mrs. Harms.
Ach so, Frau Harms, Entschuldigung.
Sorry, Mrs. Harms.
Entschuldigung, Frau Harms.
Sorry, Mrs. Harms. I see that there's a great deal of activity on the Commission benches. We don't normally allow that. It's distracted me. Mr. Ransdorf wanted the floor.
So I have the question on Mr. Verhofstadt. First, I agree with Mr. Verhofstadt that the crisis is not over. We are facing the second phases of the second stage of the crisis. What we need to overcome the crisis is the pioneering spirit. And I agree with Mr. Verhofstadt that we cannot see any pioneering spirit in the framework of the Commission. Instead, we can see the routine, the old ways of the solution of the problem, but in this case, the Commission is not the solution of the problem, but a part of the problem.
Okay.
And my problem is that in the Czech Republic, we are now before elections in Czech Republic, 74% in 2004.
Herr Ransdorf, stellen Sie ihm eine
A question maybe, Mr. Ransdorf.
Let me continue.
Stellen Sie ihm die Frage.
Yes, put your question, please.
4% of the population were in favor of involvement into European Union. 74% in 2004. Now, in the last poll, 74% are against the involvement into European Union.
Herr Ransdorf.
Thank you, Mr. Ransdorf.
So, if you speak about this problem of the lack of confidence,
Herr Ransdorf,
Mr. Ransdorf, I'm terribly sorry.
Herr Ransdorf,
Mr. Ransdorf, I think they've got the message. Let's have the answer.
The question was...
Ja, dann ist es gut.
Good, that saves us some time. Thank you, Mr. Verhofstadt. And now...
to go to Prague and to try to convince the Czechs to be pro-European. And after the fact that Mr. Václav Klaus is not longer president of Czechia, that shall be very easy to do so. And
Sehr gut.
Excellent. That was a brief answer to an unasked question. And now it really is Mrs. Harms's turn. President of the Commission, colleagues, I'm grateful to Mr. Barroso for reminding us that 2014 will be the 100th anniversary of 1914. I think it's worth thinking about these dates. We are very lucky politicians in a very lucky part of the world. We're in charge of a wonderful project, and this is something that needs to be said time and time again. What has been achieved is marvelous, and we really ought to be asking why in the last few years we've been able to do so little to defend the European miracle. In particular, in the last 5 years, we've seen more and more EU citizens seeing the EU as a problem rather than as part of the solution. The previous speakers, Swoboda and Verhofstadt included, have said that the policy to deal with the crisis has not helped us come out of the crisis. In many parts of the European Union, the anti-crisis policy has only generated misery and gloom. We keep dwelling on public finances and we fail to deal with the financial risks inherent in the private banks. On the banking union, I can only second Mr. Verhofstadt. We need to have the banking union, otherwise we won't have dealt with the causes of the crisis. As a Green, I'd like to mention a few things that haven't yet been mentioned. Unemployment. We heard about that, and we heard about dealing with the recession. But how do we want to do that? What kind of industrial and economic recovery do we want? President Barroso, it's appalling that over the past 5 years, under your watch, climate policy has been neglected. We keep hearing about energy efficiency, resource efficiency, renewable energies as being the future, but this European Union, thanks to the European Commission, is now going over to new subsidies for nuclear and for coal. New technologies, efficient technologies, are now going to be disadvantaged, and that is not in the interest of the citizens whose trust you want to win. I also don't think it's acceptable that Mrs. Merkel, tolerated by the Commission, phones up Ireland and Portugal to say that she's standing up for German industry and will make sure that BMW and Mercedes will pull out of other countries if they don't toe the German climate policy line. Why doesn't the European Commission, why doesn't anyone in the European Commission squeal about this? Farm reform is unfair and unecological. The trade agreement with the USA that you're now starting to negotiate, that's going to cost tens of thousands of farming jobs across Europe. Is that what you really want, Mr. Barroso? Democracy? Well, it started in Italy. Press freedom, freedom of opinion. You and your colleagues accepted what happened there. Now in Romania, in Hungary, we can only cry over spilt milk. The fundamental rights of the EU are being ignored. And the idea of the whistleblower Edward Snowden being holed up, having to seek asylum in Putin's Russia, what does that say about the state of the Union? As for tobacco, and the most powerful lobby in the world postponing that vote is a terrible scourge on the good name of this Parliament. On Syria, I am relieved that diplomacy has now been given a chance. The refugee disaster that we are jointly responsible for months, for years, that has been exacerbated by Syria, that is a disgrace. You can make Europe better, Mr. Barroso. You could have made Europe better. You can win people's trust by pursuing different policy. Thank you, Mrs. Harms. It's time to conclude.
So, jetzt habe ich Frau Harms.
Mrs. Harms, not only have you eaten up a minute and a half of somebody else's speaking time, but I've got millions of blue cards being waved. So, the first through the letterbox was Mr. Kaspari. So, Mr. Kaspari, you'll be the only one to put a question to Mrs. Harms. Go ahead.
Knopf drücken.
Ja, geschätzte
Thank you. Mrs. Harms, you talked about phone calls made by the German Chancellor. Now, I take it that you didn't actually spy on these phone calls yourselves, you didn't tap them. I was wondering whether this would also hold true for your position on data protection and data storage. I mean, the Greens seem to be in favour of data protection. This whole espionage case, I think in a way you've gone a little bit over the top with it. There's also the issue concerning the minister in Baden-Württemberg and, you know, the whole question of the toll there and people, road users. You know, how do you see that in that connection?
Möchten Sie antworten, Frau Harms? Bitte sehr.
Do you want to answer that, Mrs. Harms? Go ahead.
Ich würde mich freuen, wenn
I'd be delighted if what you wanted to say reflected the reality that everybody in Brussels knows. Everybody knows about the phone calls. There need to be reductions in CO2 emissions from cars. There's a trialogue outcome, and Mrs. Merkel should have stuck to that. It's not appropriate for the German car industry to be jeopardizing jobs in southern Europe. And I think, Mr. Kaspari, you should apologize. And now, on behalf of the Conservative Group, Mr. Callanan has the floor.
Europe needs a new direction, and that direction cannot be based on old ideas. Europe needs a new thinking. Now, they're not my words, Mr. Barroso, they're yours from the equivalent speech last year. The problem, of course, that yet again you haven't delivered on any of the big promises or any of the grand rhetoric that you've delivered year after year. Your chance to deliver that new direction has passed. The question now, I think, that we have to address is whether your successor will be able to deliver any of the change that the EU so desperately needs. Next year, the Commission will have a fresh leader, although personally I'm not optimistic that he or she will come up with any fresh ideas. Indeed, many of the applicants for your job are here today. It's like a giant hustings meeting. Commissioner Reding, who I think has moved to the front bench now, is clearly running as the federalist candidate, producing more eye-catching babble every day that goes past. Commissioner Wren could be delivering the speech next year, although I suspect if he did, we'd all have a bit of a late lunch. And if Commissioner Wren gets the Liberal nomination, what about poor Mr Verhofstadt? What's he going to do? Perhaps he could challenge Mr Schulz for the Socialist nomination. I'm sure he'd feel more at home in that group. In fact, I think I'm one of the few people here who doesn't actually want to do your job. I'm perfectly happy with the one that I've got. The problem, of course, is that none of these potential candidates on show today represent any new ideas. They represent the vested interests of the past, the people of the European district in Brussels rather than the people of Europe. And next May, the choice won't be about anonymous candidates from political groupings that nobody's ever heard of. It will be about whether you want to merely shuffle the deck of cards or throw the deck out completely and start afresh. The essential flaw of the EU is that it simply doesn't trust the capacity of people and markets to overcome problems. Problems, we're told repeatedly here, can only be solved by more Europe. If somebody falls off a ladder somewhere in Europe, we need a new directive to solve it. People are not allowed to be trusted to decide their own working hours. They're not even to be allowed to take up e-cigarettes, to name another topical example. And when EU lawyers say that the financial transaction tax, so beloved of so many of you, is actually illegal, as they did yesterday, That doesn't matter, because nothing, even the law, should stand in the way of further European integration. We need a new Euro-realist direction with different ideas. One that says that patriotism is healthy. To be proudly German or French or Polish is not necessarily anti-European. The concepts are not antagonistic, and to want a new direction for Europe is not anti-European. The real anti-Europeans are those whose idea of change in the EU only means moving further in the old, failed direction. The real nationalists are those who force us to accept a European nation that the reality shows that nobody in Europe actually wants. And you know what? We've tried the old interventionist, centralising, socialist-type approaches, and it may have been appropriate for the 1950s. Today, it is indeed well past its sell-by date. Let's try something different. Let's try a new approach. Perhaps we could rediscover the principle of freedom that many in Europe fashioned for the world, of opening our markets, of embracing enterprise, of eliminating the very many vested interests in the Union. Next year's elections will offer us an opportunity, not to advance European political parties and their candidates, beloved of many of us, but nobody in the real world has heard of them, but to give people a true choice, not about who you want steering the tanker, but actually whether you want the tanker to go in a different direction. Many of us want change. All of the polls indicate that the people of Europe want change. Next May, they'll have a chance to make a stand. They can say that they don't just want a new president for the EU, they want a new direction for it. Thank you.
Das Wort hat jetzt für die Vereinigte Linke.
And now for the United Left, Mr. Haji. No, hold your horses. Let's see. The Liberals seem to want to talk to Mr. Callanan. Mr. Watson.
Thank you, President. Mr. Callanan has in his group 3 members who represent Gibraltar, and yet he said nothing of the frustration over the summer of the rights to free movement of the people of Gibraltar, or the harassment they've been suffering. Does this suggest that he does not think this is important? And would Mr. Callanan welcome the fact that Prime Minister Cameron picked up the telephone to President Barroso and said, "President Barroso, please help me on this issue"?
I commend Mr. Watson's opportunism in raising the subject of Gibraltar. He raised it again yesterday. There must be an election coming up, perhaps. But the Conservative members in my group do an excellent job of representing the people of Gibraltar. He knows that I agree with them. The actions of the Spanish government have been disgraceful. Actually, the people that they're hurting are the people of Spain, the poorer parts of Spain, who actually want to cross the border into a free and prosperous Gibraltar and actually make a living and earn some money for their families. So this is, I'm sure, designed to distract attention from the many domestic problems that Mr. García Magallo is suffering with his Prime Minister in Spain, and I hope that the problems are resolved soon.
Thank you. No, this is not a Gibraltar debate. I'm terribly sorry. And so now I give the floor to Mr. Haji Georgiou.
Thank you, Chairman. Personally, I have admired the courage of Mr. Barroso and his faith that he believes that things are going well in the European Union. I try to understand where does he draw this courage from, and I think that it comes from the fact that he lives in another European Union, a different one, not in the same one in which I live in. I would like to give you some additional pictures, additional to the ones given by Mr. Svoboda. 100 meters outside the European Parliament in Brussels, every 100 meters you can see beggars. Haven't you seen them? And here in Strasbourg, on the pavements of Strasbourg, you see homeless sleeping in the heart of the European Union. In Cyprus, thousands of children have to go to school today in 2013, and they have to go to school because various organizations can give them a sandwich and a glass of milk. Thousands of young people. That's why I say that we live in different European unions, a different European Union from the one in which Mr. Barroso lives.
All the austerity policies and measures that are being promoted are not only aggravating the problems that the economy is facing, but are also leading to a deepening of the crisis. They result to increased poverty and unemployment, more cuts and privatizations. The harsh realities of the economic crisis cannot be afforded anymore by the people. By saying this, we are not only referring to the European citizens of the South, we are also referring to all those people who lose their jobs in Germany, in France, in Slovenia, in Cyprus. In my country, where the decisions taken by Troika destroyed the economy. Unfortunately, the EU is associated nowadays with the economic crisis. It has lost the battle on technology, and it also lacks coherence. And now some words about Syria. We condemn any external intervention in the internal affairs of the country. We have already the example of Iraq, where under Blair's and Bush orchestrated witch hunt to discover one bottle of chemicals, more than 1 million people perished. They still try to find that bottle of chemicals. As long as the European Union continues to be dragged by others, then it will never be able to play a substantial role towards peace. Concerning chemical weapons, we believe that the Russian proposal could potentially be a solution. Nonetheless, we cannot avoid from asking the question of who produces them and who sells them. It's high time to start being more serious about disarmament. We have a duty as Europeans to play an important role towards this end. This is the cornerstone for achieving global peace. As long as Europe accepts and continues to take part in the global arms trade industry, then wars will continue unabated. Mr. Barroso, there is a lack of democracy in Europe. 10 seconds, Mr. President. We have to accept that if we really want to see European citizens supporting the European Union project. The European Union can only and fully materialize for its people when a Cypriot or a Maltese feels equal with a German or a French or a British citizen. Democracy means respect to the minorities. There is no proportional respect today to smaller countries. And I dare to say there is no respect even in the working of our parliament as it concerns the minority opinion. And as Baroness Ashton said later to Mr. Morsi, democracy is not only elections. Democracy is the life that lies in between two elections. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Das Wort hat jetzt für die Fraktion der
And now the EFD and Mr. Farage.
Well, Mr. Barroso, not just you, but the entire unelected government of Europe had a chance perhaps for our citizens to reflect on where the real power lies in this union. I've listened to you for nearly 10 years. Full marks for consistency. You know, you're a man that likes fixed ideology. You probably picked it up when you were a communist or Maoist or whatever you were. And for the last 10 years you've pursued Euro-federalism combined with an increasing green obsession. And yeah, it's been good. For bureaucrats, for big businessmen, for landowners, it's not been a bad decade. But it's been a disaster for poor people, unemployed people and those on low wages. The euro, which you believed would give us monetary stability, has done the very opposite. It was a misconstruction from the start, and it's pretty clear that youth unemployment at nearly 50% across the Mediterranean is probably nearly double what it would have been as a direct result of the misconstruction that is the euro. They're in the wrong currency, but I know that you'll never ever admit to that, and the euro, I think, will die a very slow and painful death. But you're all in denial about that. But it's the green agenda that I find really more interesting. You keep telling us that climate change is an absolute top priority, and you've been greeted with almost hysteria in this place over the last 10 years. Well, those of us that have been sceptical about this have been mocked, derided, called deniers. We've argued from the start that the science wasn't settled, and we've argued very strongly that the measures we're taking to combat what may or may not be a problem are damaging our citizens, and we've been proved to be right. Tens of millions forced into fuel poverty, manufacturing industry being driven away because, of course, our competitors in China and in America are going for cheap fossil alternatives, and, of course, wind turbines blighting the landscapes and seascapes of Europe. And still today, you go on about green growth. Well, the consensus is breaking behind you. You know, Commissioner Tajani the other day said that actually we face a systematic industrial massacre. It is time to stop this stupidity and to help you. There's the NASA photograph last August of the ice cap, the northern ice caps. And there is the NASA photograph this year of the ice caps. It is increased by 60% in 1 year. Leading American scientists are now saying we are going into a period of between 15 and 30 years of global cooling. We may have made one of the biggest, stupidest collective mistakes in history by getting so worried about global warming. You can reverse this in the next 7 or 8 months. You can bring down people's taxes. If you don't, they'll vote on it in the European elections of next year.
So, erwartungsgemäß habe ich wieder.
Blue cards aplenty. What a surprise. Yeah, you expected that too. I'm afraid I can only take the first one. Sorry, Mrs. Jaakonsaari, Mr. Leichtfried pipped you at the post. You'll have to argue in the group tonight. Unless, Mr. Leichtfried, you'd like to yield as a good Austrian gentleman. Oh, go ahead then, Mr. Leichtfried. Lisa, I tried everything I could, but he's just not going to give up. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Farage, you are very amusing, but less and less so. You sit there in the front row and lecture us on what we should do better, what Mr. Barroso should do better. But what have you done since you took your seat in the European Parliament? You haven't drafted a single report. You've never drafted a single opinion. The only thing you've ever done is talk, talk, talk. And you accuse other people of not doing anything. How can you justify that to your voters? How can you justify that you've never done any work here?
Oh no, I'm sorry, old son. I haven't accused you of not working. Far from that. I've accused you of doing far too much. And actually, collectively in this House, forming a consensus, and I'm going to come back to this green agenda. You all formed the view that carbon dioxide emissions were leading to rapid global warming and that it was the greatest crisis that's ever faced mankind, and therefore we had to start taxing carbon. There has been no global warming, sir, for 20 years. The ice caps have grown significantly over the last 12 months, and I'm making a positive proposal that would put back into work tens of thousands of people, and I'm saying let us scrap these climate levies and let's see where the science goes over the course of the next few years. I can't think of a more positive thing that's been said in this House this morning.
So, das Wort hat jetzt die Frau Kollegin.
So, next, Nikki Sinclair for the non-attached, please.
I'm amazed that we've had the State of the Union address today. I'm surprised that Mrs Merkel hasn't asked us to postpone it until after the German general election. Well, Mr Barroso, this was your fourth and last State of the Union address, and you have brought along the rest of your appointed commission for support. Never before has a tier of this Parliament been filled with such incompetence and failure. A question: Why is it that it is the President of the unelected arm of the EU that gives this address? Why is it not President Schulz? One of your Commission is here today despite having only an attendance record of 52%, almost as low as a UKIP MEP. Your flagship policy when you became President was a much vaunted Lisbon strategy, which seeks to make the EU the most dynamic economy in the world. That sank without trace. In fact, the EU has gone into reverse. Unemployment, especially among the youth, is rocketing, and little Miss Red Tape sitting next to you isn't helping. Mr Barroso, your own Commission's polls show there is no trust in the EU. The people of the biggest 5 countries feel the EU is not working. 2/3 of people across the EU think their views are not being heard. No wonder that when they do express an opinion, for example in a rare referendum, they are treated with contempt and somehow that they don't understand. The arrogance is palpable. The people must be listened to. Let the people decide.
Thank you. And now for Council, Mr. Linkevicius.